Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the Medical Affairs Professional Society, or MAPS, webinar, and thank you for your time today. This is Kirk Shepard. I am president of MAPS for 2017. I'd first like to start off that if you have questions, please use your chat feature, and we will have a question and answer session at the end. Just first as a brief intro, I'm a board-certified physician in oncology and hematology. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for about 27 years. I've had a variety of positions as head of medical affairs since approximately 2002, and prior to that I was also in R&D, strategy, and even the commercial organization. More recently, in the past 10 years, I've been Senior Vice President and Head of Global Medical Affairs for Baxalta, Baxter, Shire, and Takeda. I'll be joined today by some of the members of what we call the Executive Leadership Committee, or the ELC for MAPS, and you will hear from some of them later. Today is the beginning of a series of podcasts from MAPS, and we'd like to do simply three things today. One, review a vision for medical affairs in the next years ahead, very briefly. Two, ask you to join me on this important journey to transform medical affairs to meet the growing and changing needs, which we will talk about in this podcast. And three, introduce you to the MAPS organization. For those of you who are part of medical affairs, and that's probably most of you, we are a very unfortunate group, very fortunate to be part of a growing value and importance in medical affairs in our industry. As you all know, dramatic changes have occurred in healthcare landscape over the past 10 to 15 years, and at the same time, parallel to this, dramatic changes have occurred in medical affairs. Let's have the next slide, please. So we know that in the recent years, there's been many changes in healthcare delivery, stakeholders who we communicate with, and drug development as far as our role. And what we have been doing is reacting to the environment that has gotten us started. As you can see here, and this only mentions 4 areas, you see increased focus in real-world evidence, health outcomes, creating a strong need for medical to generate significant scientific evidence that's needed now for all products. There's been rapid market changes and changing in how the industry is reimbursed that makes us a more important partner as far as interacting with these partners, as far as establishing the data and then presenting the data. 3, the competitive landscape, expectations, and demand of patients and healthcare physicians has changed, and we need to keep in touch with that. And so medical affairs, particularly in our field positions, plays a more key role in providing the medical practice insights into the strategy and being a part of that strategy formation. The companies I've been in recently, medical is an equal partner with commercial and patient access as far as forming that strategy for the product. And lastly is just the increased regulation. There's growing restrictions, interactions, communications with physicians worldwide. They're growing to customer-facing role that's very important in medical, and a need for strong compliance programs to keep our people safe and to make sure we walk the right path. Next slide. So this changes our value proposition. Why the medical affairs profession matters now more than ever. First of all, we need to agree on our scope of responsibilities and define our vision of our role and agree on that. And that may be different for every company. But still, we need to have some certainty about what medical affairs can do in each of our companies. And then we need to take that vision and that role and communicate it to our partners so they know what medical affairs can do now. And so many times you find when you're forming medical affairs at companies, and I've done that 6 times, that they really don't know what medical affairs can do and are enlightened when you tell them of the possible roles and how we can fit in. And that grows every year, it seems like, as far as the roles for medical. Also, is our importance in the drug development process now. I mentioned that before. The new type of data that is not only nice to have, but is becoming necessary for all of our products. No more is it just pivotal trials and safety and getting regulatory approval. But as all of you, a lot of you know, it's the data that supports us in real world. It's the patient-centric information and data now that we need to cover to make sure that our product truly brings value. And then simply critical role in relationship building. So many times I think a lot of you have heard the description of medical affairs as the bridge between science and R&D and commercial. And we need to make sure with all the partners we deal with from day to day in our companies that we know how to build those relationships and what the expectations are, and to make sure that we communicate clearly. So why MAPS? Why now? We just mentioned the changing environment, the things we've already commented on, that creates an opportune time for us to establish the Medical Affairs Society. As a nonprofit organization, MAPS will lead the life science industry through a global network and team of medical affairs professionals. And this is part of what we want to do, to form that network so that no longer we're acting alone in each of our individual companies. Some of us attempting to form partnership with other companies to bring consensus or best practice to our companies. But that's so difficult to do when there's no place to go that's common to all of us. So our mission is to bring us all together, connect the dots, so to speak, to produce, where we can, standardization and best practices, to produce white papers, SOPs that perhaps would be generic to be able to apply to our companies, and we change them to make fit our companies more, and templates to make things easy. And in general, I guess just turning theories and the good ideas that I've heard all of you talk about in various meetings into action. That's one of the things we want to see, is the ideas that we have not go to waste, not stay behind in the conference we just attended, but have a place to go to be turned into action. So the timing of the organization of the Medical Affairs Professional Society is very good. MAPS will strive to be the voice of medical affairs. Even though at this time we have many good organizations who offer training, conferences, and other similar services to medical affairs, there's no organization that stands totally and at the same time focused for the medical affairs voice. MAPS doesn't want to replace or move into the space of many of these other good organizations, but we would like to connect the work together so that we may forward the agenda of medical affairs vision to be more cohesive in a more rapid manner. MAPS, as I said before, will strive to be the voice of medical affairs within the industry and partner with many organizations to do this. Much good is being done now in education, medical affairs conferences. We now need to drive this work in collaboration, each other, to get outcomes. I'm sure many of you have been to these informative, thought-provoking medical affairs conferences or meetings, and at the end, the participants agree that in the future, there should be collaboration among partners to form new guidelines or procedures or explore different models or tools to forward the vision of medical affairs. But most of these proposed work streams fall flat because there's no organization to carry the momentum on. And that's what we want to do at MAPS. Carry the momentum on. Be a continuous organization, not built around events or meetings, but a continuous organization of turning ideas into action through collaboration. MAPS will strive to grow a global team, next slide, and create a forum for a group of professionals to share ideas, create standardization, and best practices in medical affairs. MAPS will be for the leaders of medical affairs function, but as well for persons who specialize in the more specific functions in medical affairs, such as medical communication, MSLs, medical information, grants, studies, etc. However, again, by no means do we want to replace the societies that represent each of these functions, because they are able to dive deeper into the specifics of each function. MAPS will be a place for persons from each of these individual organizations to come together to form connectivity. It will also include and be open to people outside of medical affairs with whom we partner, such as other departments in R&D, patient access, and commercial, and include vendors as partners. These are important partners who can give us tools and services to perform our roles in medical affairs in a better way. So the first priorities of MAPS over the next few months will be the following: to listen, to get feedback from the members and the leadership as far as what should be the priorities of medical affairs and MAPS going forward. 2, together form the role of medical affairs, particularly how it fits together with the roles of other partners in our company. Too many times individual roles of medical affairs, R&D, commercial are decided without thinking of the partnership that is needed to bring successful companies forward. And 3, when these vision and roles are formed, we need to communicate and roll these messages to partners within the company and work with them to finesse. Next slide. So this is where the first annual meeting of MAPS comes in. The MAPS first meeting is going to be on June 22nd, or 20th through the 22nd, 2017, at the Gaylord National Convention Center. This is in the National Harbor of Maryland. Conference will cover a variety of topics, including the role of medical affairs in drug development, today's world, keys to accurate and transparent scientific communications to internal and external stakeholders, and how to use real-world evidence and big data to achieve success. How will this conference be different? Well, it's the kickoff for what I call the continuous motion, the continuous partnership of all of us within MAPS. But at the same time, there will be increased interactivity between the participants and the speakers. Many times, this interactivity is often limited to 2 or 3 minutes Q&A at the end of a presentation. When you see our agenda, you will see something different. There will be limited didactic presentations. There will be multifunctional panel sessions that allow for discussion and presentation of a variety of opinions and experiences. There will be hands-on rotating workshops that allow participants to share experiences and learn from peers on a variety of topics. And as an elective session, although I think very important, at the end of the meeting, hopefully to keep all of you in your seats and not taking off on airplanes, is that we'll invite you, all the interested medical affairs professionals, to meet with the MAPS leadership and the ELC to help us to shape the future of our profession. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to participate on the ground floor, forming the foundation of MAPS. Not only to help form MAPS as the voice of medical affairs, but to make sure your voice is heard. Next slide. And this gives you a just brief look at the homepage for the website, and also gives the address so you can go to it to find out more about membership, about the annual conference, and about MAPS itself. Next slide. So now I would like to introduce by this slide the Executive Leadership Committee, or the ELC, and have each of them introduce themselves briefly and maybe say a few words about MAPS. And if I could ask Therese if she would start. Trace McCall. And we're trying to make connections with Therese, so I don't want you to think as if you've lost connection. So we are attempting to make connections now with Therese.
Kirk, can you hear me?
We can. A little bit of static in the background, but it's clear to me.
Excellent. Okay, thank you everybody for joining this call. I'm delighted you have invested this hour to be part of this discussion and also to learn a little bit more about MAPS. I'm particularly, personally, very excited about this organization. My background is that I joined the industry more than 30 years ago in a drug discovery role. And despite having opportunities to work in other roles in clinical development and on the commercial side, I really found my professional calling in the medical affairs space. So I've been extremely passionate and dedicated to this piece and this important role that we play in our industry for several decades now. I think we bring, as Kirk mentioned, a very unique perspective and partnership opportunity within our organizations, but also with our external stakeholders. And that is the area that I have dedicated myself to now, and work with organizations to realize a vision and that impact that we can bring as we develop those critical relationships and communication vehicles and deliverables with our healthcare providers, with our increasingly important reimbursement decision makers, and of course with our patients. So I really believe that we play this very critical role as the voice of our external stakeholders within our organization. And as Kirk mentioned, the partnership that we need to play and be stepping up and at various tables and teams that we sit on are so important. So for me, MAPS is long overdue. I think we've all over the years wrestled with very similar questions, issues. You know, when we run into each other at conferences, you know, you realize that there's so much richness in that conversation. But I'm extremely excited and delighted to see MAPS coming to fruition as an organization uniquely dedicated to our profession. I think that collectively we can bring a lot of forward-thinking, new ambitions within our area and our profession through working together and through partnering more, and so that there is a common approach and an alignment within our profession that will really advance our role, our value, and our impact within our organizations, but also outside of our organizations. So I'm delighted to be part of this organization. I look forward to meeting many, or if not all of you, at the June conference, and continuing to work with you as we build a high impact and high value organization for our profession. So Kirk, I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you very much, Therese. Next, I could ask Neil, please, to comment and introduce himself.
Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay. My name is Elaine Hebert. I'm a pulmonary critical care doc. I'm actually relatively new to industry, having spent about 20 years in practice, and I've been in industry about 10 years. I started off actually in Med Affairs at Jazz, and then I've moved through a number of large and small companies, device and pharmaceuticals, and I've had the great good luck, I would say, to work both in clinical development, Med Affairs, and I've been field-based as well. So it's a great opportunity, or I've been given the great opportunity to join MAPS and help to look to the future. And really, I kind of think of MAPS as, and medical affairs in general as bringing people together, as Kirk said. And I think of a story of my father. My father's name was Jack, and everybody called him Smiling Jack because he had this way of somehow bringing people together. And so I've tried to model myself in his shadow, in a sense. And so medical affairs does exactly what my father did as a teacher, and very much we're all teachers thinking about that. The opportunity that we've been given in Med Affairs is really to shape the future, and very much MAPS is and should be part of that. Very much I view the future of Med Affairs as involving not just what we traditionally think of as Med Affairs roles, many of the functions that many of you are aware of and are very familiar with, but really looking to where the profession can and I think will go in terms of information technology, data, wearables, and certainly even functions that go beyond the life science industry. And actually life sciences, not so much as we think of it now, but life sciences as we might think of it in the future, looking at populations as a whole. So I'm so excited to be part of this group with such tremendous varied experience, and I look forward to, as Teresa said, meeting you and participating and helping to grow the future.
Neil, thank you very much. Maybe I'll ask one more person from the ELC. Ramin, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Kirk. My name is Ramin Farhad. Very excited to be with everybody today, and thank you very much for dialing in and listening to this hour about MAPS. I have about close to 20 years experience in medical affairs. Unlike some of the other members in the committee, from day one, I pretty much started in medical affairs, and I'm still in medical affairs organization. But I have been pretty fortunate that I've touched all the different functions and sub-functions within medical affairs organizations, from medical information to publication, medical communication, project planning, launches, building medical affairs organizations, and focusing really on overall the strategy of medical affairs in the organizations that I have worked with. And that has been definitely a roller coaster and an exciting ride. One of the key reasons, there are of course many reasons that I decided to join the committee when I was approached last year. The personal reason that I have is the passion that I got about medical affairs. I think this is a very critical function within the industry from both sides, not only just internally and the demand and that it is on medical affairs from our internal stakeholders, but also more importantly from the patients and from the health givers and from the payers. And we are in a very unique position, as many of you already know, and others have spoken about this, that we are kind of the connection between the outside and inside of any company that we all work at. And that, to me, that's a very unique and powerful position to be at. And I'm very passionate about my role and about the function in general. With regards to MAPS, for me, it comes down to so many different things, but a couple of really important one is the voice that Kirk talked about before, that there are currently no medical affairs association that is dedicated to the profession, to the function, and to the profession, and is focusing on the future, not just what we have on hand today, which is incredibly important, but the medical affairs in 5 years, 10, 20, even 30 years from now. And having a say in that together, not just the ELC members and all of you guys on this call and everybody else that is in the profession, to me that's incredibly exciting. Building that medical affairs community and building the future of medical affairs, it's what makes it really exciting and interesting and challenging also at the same time too. Of course, we'll focus on the guidelines and the creation of a standardization and the networking and the career development. All of those things play an important role as well, and that's why I'm so excited to be here and be part of the MAPS organization. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, Ramin, and thank you to the other people who also commented. And I'd like to thank the ELC in general. Three people who have not been able to hear with us today. Actually, it's 4 people. Gail Cockwell from Purdue Frederick, Victoria Elegant from Amgen, Robert Matthias from Celgene, and Michael Mullane from BioFrontera. All these people have really shown a lot of dedication for the past months in trying to build the foundation. But that's where our role really ends, as being the sole builders. We really need to work together and collaborate with all of you. It's a journey that we need to do together. It's a journey where the vision has to be built from all of the members and not just a select few. So I want to thank you all for your time. Before we go to questions, I just want to welcome you to join me and MAPS on the journey and try and reinforce the goals of MAPS to transform medical affairs. So with that, I will open it up for questions and see what's come across. And I am being given, I guess it's not one question, it's saying we've got a few questions here about the meeting itself and more specifics about the agenda. So, Ramin, I hate to call on you again, but since you've been one of the main engineers of this, can you, do you have slides you can bring up? Okay, you're pulling them up? Okay. So we can show them more about the content of the meeting that's coming up in June. Oh, good. Thanks.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I know, I'm sure that there are many questions about the agenda and what we're trying to focus on, what we're trying to accomplish. And of course, this agenda, it's in the final draft, so it's pretty much there. And we are finalizing everything, and it will be available on the website for all of you to have it and take a look at it. And please, by no means, if you think you have comments and there are areas that you're interested in, please send in your ideas to MAPS, and we'll be happy to take a look at them. I'm one of the engineers behind the agenda. This was definitely a lot of heavy lifting that started last year, several months ago, maybe I want to say sometime probably in August, and it's been back and forth with all of the executive leadership committee and Kirk, of course, and also we've taken it outside to our colleagues and our peers to make sure that what we're putting together is really filling a need within our function. If you look at the overall, the meeting is 2.5 days, and this is one of the most challenging things. We could easily put 2 weeks of topics that are really important and hot and cutting edge, but we had to break it down to 2.5 days. The first day of the meeting, we are starting and setting kind of the stage with focusing on building the best class medical affairs organization, a world-class medical affairs organization, and looking at the future a bit and looking at what's coming in the next 5-10 years. And we'll have a chair for that meeting. And we also definitely want to focus on who are we? What is medical affairs? What is our identity? And start talking about establishing the core competencies. As Kirk mentioned earlier, this particular session, and you'll see it throughout the agenda, that we'll have a chair, that will have some didactic presentation, but very minimal, and then we bring a panel of experts to discuss different topics that are really important and have become really areas that are of interest to everybody. In the later half of the morning, as you see on the agenda on your screen, we are focusing on driving the increased value of medical affairs all the way from preclinical to launch. And we specifically have gone back and forth with the ELC and some of our peers and making sure that we start talking about the role, the critical role that medical affairs plays in the preclinical. We all do realize that not every single company that medical is playing a role there, but as Kirk mentioned earlier, we definitely want the society to be future looking and not just necessarily where we stand today, and kind of drive us to the next level of medical affairs organization. This is going to be a very interesting area because we will have, of course, a chair to pull and touch upon key areas within preclinical all the way to launch. But we'll have an expert panel from head of GMA, R&D, commercial organization, compliance, HEORE, and plus patient advocacy. Everything we do in medical affairs, we want to make sure that we are keeping the patient in mind. And I know a lot of you that are leaders in this area, you have a very good understanding that the patient centricity is becoming a really not only just a very critical topic and a hot topic, but also an area that a lot of the companies are wanting to have medical affairs to focus on. If we can go to the next slide. In the afternoon of the first day, we want to kind of carry on the same theme that we talked about from preclinical to launch. And in the afternoon, and in the next day and a half, as a matter of fact, there are 9 workshops, and all of these workshops, and I don't want to use that term loosely, because we thought about this and what would be the most value to the attendees, and we didn't want to have just presentations and talk about concepts. We want to make sure that we make our workshops case-based, real cases that the presenters and the co-presenters are dealing with right now, and they have been able to overcome those challenges, and really turn this into a applied training and lesson learned, and something that everybody can take back with them and start implementing some or all or some form or shape of it within their organization. Throughout all of these workshops, and the 9 workshops that you'll come up and you'll see on your screen, they're all focused on giving you tools, recipes, templates that you can actually take back, and either you use all of them, some of them, or none of them. But we definitely want to make sure that you have something tangible in your hand for sure. If you look at the workshop on the afternoon of the first day, it's divided into 3 separate case-based workshops, focusing on setting this launch strategy, and launch is becoming more and more critical for our organization, and the level of participation in launch and the internal demand from medical affairs is increasing substantially, and we'll focus on building that strategy. The second workshop will focus on generating data, the real-world evidence, and what does that all mean, and how do we need to manage that. And the last workshop is communicating and communication to the stakeholders. These are rotating workshops, so everybody gets to go through every single one. It's not one that you have to choose. And we wanted to make sure that the presenters, the facilitators, I should say, because the presentation in these workshops are very minimal. They're focusing on earlier stage to pre-launch as well as launch to post-launch. And we also have a keynote speaker focusing on establishing a successful medical affairs launch readiness plan. So a good chunk of our time will focus on launch, and this is, again, thank you for all of you who have taken surveys and have come back that this is an area of interest. The next slide. The next slide is day 2. Believe it or not, we've just gone through one day. We start with a keynote speaker focusing on the construction and building on medical affairs strategy, pretty much focusing on implementation and execution of a medical plan. And what does that medical plan look like? Then we'll immediately after the talk, we'll go into 3 rotational case-based workshops again. Workshop 1 will focus on the essential toolkits, guides, and really the phases and the recipe for developing a robust medical strategy. We don't want to just talk about things. We really want to make sure that the folks are leaving the meeting with whether it's tool, templates, systems that they need to have. A lot of our partners from the consultants organizations, from vendors organization, will be also helping and participating in these workshops. So you will see that if you're talking about a specific case, a specific challenge, or 2 that we're talking about in a workshop, we may and we will co-partner with some of our vendors, making sure that we are not just talking about the problem statement, which is really the easy part, because there are a lot of challenges, but also giving you the solution. The second workshop will focus on the real-world evidence generation and big data. This is absolutely one of the hottest topic right now in our profession, and we want to make sure that we spend a good chunk focusing on that. And the last workshop on day 2 in the morning is focusing on the implementing the medical strategy and the successful thought leader engagement plan. At the end, we want to make sure that we're taking everything back to the roots and the ground level. We have done our best trying to pull everything in a package that makes sense, and they're not just topics that we just thrown out there and they're not really related, and hopefully you will appreciate that. And as I mentioned, this will also may evolve in the next couple of months or so a little bit, but the context is really there. Wednesday afternoon, we are talking about the 4 C's of communication plan. Workshop 1 will be optimizing and enhancing the impact of data dissemination via the scientific communication platform. I hope a lot of you already know what that is, and if you don't, we'll definitely take a deep dive there. The second workshop will focus on insights collection, insight collections, management, and communication of the insights, especially internally back to the organization, which is an area that is becoming more and more important within our function. And the last workshop is operationalization of the SCP on the field, and what does SCP really mean, and how do you take that SCP and scientific communication platform all the way to the field level. The last day, if you go to the next slide, please. The last day on Thursday, we'll start the morning with taking a look at the crystal ball. Not that we necessarily have one. Hopefully we'll all be able to build that crystal ball together as we go forward, but the future of medical affairs. And that will be followed by 3 workshops again. Workshop 1 will focus on innovative solutions and the impact of medical affairs. Workshop 2 will focus on the building the talent and the future of medical affairs. So this workshop is really focused on the career development and opportunities, which is probably one area that we don't spend enough time on in our careers in medical affairs. And the last one, which is very interesting, is social media and digital opportunity and the role of medical affairs, and how can we crack that code within medical affairs. We are hoping to be able to adjourn the meeting by noon. However, we do have elective sessions, and for those of you, and hopefully this will be everyone, but we certainly wanted to give that opportunity for some of those folks that they have to catch a flight, that they have that option. But we certainly will take a short break and come back together, and this is the sessions that we really want to build the future of MAPS together. I'm hoping that all of you will participate in that as well. And the real question is, where do we go from here? What should be the mission and the vision of medical affairs, the value proposition? What's the purpose of the society? And we don't want to have just a small group that makes decision of that, and we want to make sure that we involve all of you for building the future of the society together. I know I probably went way over my time, but I definitely wanted to make sure that everybody gets a good understanding of what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Ramin. No, I think that was important because we did have a few questions about the agenda. So, and people can access it, so it will be sent out also an email blast. But let's move on to a couple of other questions. Got a question here. How do I help and participate before the meeting? And we would love to hear from you. In fact, I may be calling some of you as a warning just to get your insights. Don't worry, I won't badge you and call you during dinner time and keep calling till you call me back. I will certainly put out an invitation to talk, but I'd love to hear from all of you as far as your thoughts about MAPS. But if you do want to you want to participate, on the website there is a Get Involved tab. And that way we can get your information, your name, and communicate with you. As I said before, I may be calling some of you anyway to put out an invitation to speak to me about your visions. Let's see, another question here. How often will you have MAPS meetings? So we've planned the first annual meeting. I think there will also be regional meetings. There's currently talk about a meeting, and planning has started for one in Asia in the fall. But when you talk about the main MAPS meeting, it most likely will start on an annual basis unless we hear from you that a different frequency or cadence is needed. So we're really looking, the reason why the meeting is so important in interaction with you outside of the meeting is that we want you to build us, to help us as far as what's helpful to you. So I see the meeting also as not the end game. As I said before, we want to build a continuous organization so that from the meeting, though, comes not only the chance from face-to-face and interacting, but also to put presentations and ideas into action, as we talked about before. I would like to see all the presentations with action sections at the end. How do we advance what just has been talked about? And that advancement could be an initiative set up, task force to move it on throughout the year, and that may require more meetings to keep tabs on what's happening, to a white paper, et cetera. So as I said before, one of our main themes is taking these ideas and putting them into actions, and that's one of the main objectives of our first meeting, and to also get ideas from you as to how often or the frequency of these meetings, or should they be divided in more topical, maybe specific sections of medical affairs besides also going to different regions. Is another question. Ramin is going to, another question here that Ramin's going to take about the conference that just came in.
Okay, great. I see the question now. So this question has to do, I'm assuming that based on the nature of the question, it may be coming from our consultants, vendors, and agencies that we work with quite a bit. And the question has to do, how can agencies and consultants get involved with MAPS? I think Kirk might have mentioned this earlier, and it certainly has been my experience in my 20 years in the medical affairs organization, that a lot of the success of our function is really dependent on our agencies, our external partners, consultants, and companies that we work with. There's the website on MAPS. There is, I believe there is a section that is for exhibitors and getting involved from an agency and a consultant perspective. So I will definitely will advise you to get on that, and if you have any specific question about your company or about the times of the exhibits, or how you can get involved, or maybe even help and be part of the workshops and co-present, and I use the term present a little bit loosely because the workshops are really solution and action focused. If you're interested in those type of opportunities, please go on the website and get in touch with the organizers, and I'm sure they will get back to you as soon as possible. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you. Another question here from someone who's thinking of career change, about will MAPS be about career development as far as medical affairs? And I love this question. I'm glad this came in, because that's certainly something we have discussed, and we'll get membership feedback on this. But we would like to be a part of letting people know what it's like to be in medical affairs. People who are PhDs, PharmDs, MDs, people perhaps who are in commercial, people who are coming out of school, whatever, so that it's clear to them of how exciting a career in medical affairs can be. So we plan to do that, plan to have a way of connecting them up to fellowships, to opportunities where they can learn more about medical affairs, if it's not directly from us, which it probably will be, but also things that will involve experiences. So I'm really glad we got this question, because it's something we're going to need a lot of feedback from the members as far as how do we do this better, as far as reaching out to develop a larger talent pool of people who have the passion to be in medical affairs. I'm having trouble reading this one. Can you comment on the reporting structure of medical affairs through CMO medical directors versus sales and marketing directors? So I think this is a general question, not directed to MAPS, but about how medical affairs is structured. I think the best way to answer this right now, I have my own biases on what structure I like, but when you look at the benchmarking, most medical affairs people are reporting into R&D or a CMO, and I think you're going to see a dramatically decreasing, as already been shown in benchmarking, where medical affairs is reporting into commercial or marketing. The third actually growing, but not as dramatically growing structure, is where medical affairs is independent. Serves as a bridge between R&D and commercial, but reports directly to the CEO, et cetera. So this is something, though, we do want to explore and be a part of our learnings as far as what are the structures out there and what is the best governance, and the way we fit best as a partner, as I mentioned before, is a main theme in our companies. We've all got to look more towards partnering together and working towards a common goal than individual silos. Maybe Neil and Trace, do either of you want to add to that as far as the reporting structure of medical affairs?
This is Kirk. This is Trace. I mean, I think it's an interesting question, but to your point, I think increasingly what it reflects for me is the need to continue to articulate the independence but partner role that medical affairs plays. I think the reporting structure can impact some flexibility that the organization can drive within an organization. And to your point around benchmarking, it seems as though, at least from my standpoint, we seem to be certainly in the space now where medical affairs is recognized as a department and a function in its own right, and therefore, you know, as you said, either reports into R&D side of the house from a leadership standpoint or into the broader leadership of the organization. So I think that for me personally, I think that seems to be where organizations are landing and where our benchmarking is suggesting that that's a good place for medical affairs to be.
So Neil, I know we gave that question to Therese. Maybe if I could give you another question just for your insights. And again, this is more of an opinion one, but congratulations, MAPS is needed. My question is, how can underappreciated, undervalued medical affairs leadership do something quickly to improve the perception of medical affairs among internal commercial stakeholders?
You know, we talk more and more about the firewall between commercial and medical affairs, or medical clinical in general, and I think we need to recognize, and I think increasingly everybody knows, that we're all on the same team, we're all moving in the same direction. People don't like to hear the term no, and I honestly don't think the term no should exist within a company where everybody is on the same team. The answer should be not no, but how can we do this? And it often involves, as I mentioned earlier, bringing different functions together, and whether that's bringing legal in the same room as commercial, in the same room as some of the medical affairs leadership. And I think those are the wins. The wins are not the no's, but the how can we get there. And I think we are getting there, you know, over time. So I like to think of this as a positive, and the positive would be, how do we get there, not we can't get there, because I think there's always a way to find the right way to do it, and the right way to disseminate that scientific information that really we're responsible for.
Thank you, Neil. This is Kirk again. I guess we should end it now because we're closing the hour, but again, I want to thank you all for your time and really welcome you to MAPS. Hopefully you will join us on this journey and reinforce the medical affairs vision, what we can be. So thank you again, and look forward to talking to you in the future.